inches from death. A pony? Haven't.
Let me guess. James, that's going to get you cancelled for being very poor taste.
Just a flash.
It's time to adjust those shoulder pads, backcomb what's left of your hair, and jump into the DeLorean for a look back at what's possibly the best decade anyone could ever have grown up in.
Shall we play a game?
This is Bring Back the 80s with your hosts James Alderson and me, Andy Jackson.
Hello, good evening, good morning, and welcome to another edition of the Bring Back the 80s podcast. Episode we think is number 12.
Yeah.
If we got it wrong, again in the subtitles, it will come up and we'll put it right.
I'm still wearing the same t-shirt.
Yeah.
I ain't getting on no plane.
Because
we're a fool.
Can we do that accent though? Can we do that?
That's American, isn't
it? That's okay.
It's not appropriate.
I have to double check. Can we just put a trigger warning out as well?
Yeah.
As we said last time round.
Okay.
Because of the subject matter of this podcast.
What's it about?
It's about disasters.
Oh, I didn't want to see that again.
turning disaster into comedy and comedy quite possibly into disaster for our careers.
But as we said in the last episode, it's a great way to deal with things. Tragedy, grief, all that sort of stuff. A lot of comedians have done stand-up at wakes and stuff. They haven't, but that
would be a bloody good thing, though, wouldn't it?
No, to be honest, they have. I have heard it happen a few times, and obviously some disasters are weddings, and I've done stand up at weddings, so it's not bad. And this getting on a plane when I was a kid with the Lockerbie, that was a big problem for me. I was constantly. We touched on the last episode, looking for satellites and stuff, planes going over. It was like, oh no, it was just. It played on your mind, every disaster that happened, because everybody heard about it on the Monday morning on TV AM. It was dark, and then for the next 2 weeks, that's all you thought about. When AIDS was a huge thing in the 80s, all you thought about.
Oh, my God,
when you went to a toilet. Like, oh, my goodness, I'm going to catch AIDS. Or someone just accidentally spat in my face when they were talking to me. Oh, my God, I'm going to get AIDS. Don't kiss them.
Although Princess Diana, bless her, did fix that as well by going and kissing an AIDS patient, didn't she?
Yeah, she did all that.
So that made that little bit of spittle was not...
Well, Boris did the same, because he's very much like Princess Diana. And so he went around loads of COVID wards. He didn't, apparently. But he did, apparently. But he didn't. But he might have done. And he got COVID, but he didn't have that either. Or did. He nearly died.
He did nearly die.
Did he?
Did nearly die.
He didn't catch it, did he?
We don't know.
Okay. So what he didn't catch was a bloody comb. But so he didn't. It was everything all at once. So that now we get this sort of drizzle of lots of information from every single angle of every single part of the world. But back then it was like, this has happened. And everybody thought the same thing. It was all or nothing.
Yes.
And, you heard about something like Lockerbie, and everybody was then thinking, oh, my God, I'm not getting on a plane. Forget that. So that's why Mr. T said.
Yeah, and this is where the whole thing of having to take your shoes off in airports and having to take your belt off has come from.
Yeah.
That's all off the back of the tragedies like this. And it's just what it's done is it's just made our lives just that tiny little bit more inconvenient and miserable. But you add all these little things up and there's a big cumulative effect.
There is indeed, exactly right. And that's why one of the biggest disasters, in my opinion, of the 80s was the Toyota Carina. I mean, it was trying to be the Escort, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it never worked. And this is a brand new brochure, of course. Another disaster, Spaghetti Junction. That was built 70s, 80s, I think. Awful. Another disaster. Loads of knocking down of historic buildings in the 80s to make way for precincts and pedestrianised areas. But yes, so some disastrous cars, but look, I mean, it looks lovely. Don't get me wrong.
Lovely. And for a Japanese car maker, it's surprising that it's not reliable.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know if it was reliable or not. It just is a catastrophe. It's just not pleasant. It wasn't unique. Toyota often came up with some nice designs, but this was a jab at trying to be like the Escort.
Yeah.
And because I could see the success of it, I think, what was it, the biggest selling one in the end? Was it?
I think it was the Fiesta. The Fiesta was the biggest.
Top three,
but the Escort was definitely in the top three.
And anyway.
That's the way you've asked me as if I know these things.
Well, as if you remember, but none of us can remember, so what's the bloody point?
I've noticed that you're not handing any of these items over to me anymore, James. Nope. It's because...
Well, it's disastrous topic, so I really think that I'm pushing my luck, handing you anything, and then he found it be a firebacker, just end up just chucking it on the sod it, and he's had it. This is knackered. Would you like a nice, lovely surprise?
I'd love a lovely surprise,
okay,
James.
Let's do it.
Shall I reach for the lunchbox surprise this time?
You grab it.
James's special lunchbox surprise.
So, opening up the Transformers red lunchbox. Oh, yes. Blackjacks.
Yeah. So, obviously, back in the day, they came individually. You can still, in random traditional sweet shops, get them individually. I'm a bit disappointed that they're now in packs. It's not the way they're meant to be. They're meant to be 2 for a penny, something like that.
From the big jar. Yeah.
That's it. Get the glass jar, not the plastic jar. Didn't matter.
Oh no, it's got to be a glass jar. Yeah.
Take the lid off, and then you get rectangular, not square. These are square, aren't they?
Yes.
Which is a disappointment. Square. I'm not a big fan of licorice, but they're always that sort of taste, weren't they?
There's enough sugar in these to make them, I would imagine. Yeah.
I mean, these don't feel the same to a start.
A bit too squidgy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Now, this could be the thing where we go completely wrong, because we haven't tried these, and we're just going to end up with black teeth now for the rest of the episode. Good?
Same taste, but just soft.
It's good taste.
Not quite as strong. I'll have another one to be sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the design's changed because obviously they didn't say. I don't think they said blackjack on. I think they were just black. Maybe they did say blackjack on, but they definitely used to be so hard to chew that you would lose as filling. And I know we say this about all the sweets, but they were definitely hard. It wasn't just that we were weaker. Maybe we are just so strong-jawed now. Just strong jawline.
So all the vitamins.
I mean, that would have been a disaster at our age. Had to have some really chewy sweet and lose a
filling. Oh, you always. But back in those days, though, people were always losing fillings.
Oh yeah,
the fillings for some reason back in the 1980s, they hadn't quite perfected the mix, and they would never stick. And if you were eating a toffee or something like a blackjack,
come out,
your filling would just pop out, and you'd have to go to the dentist.
They were made of lead
and have another. They probably were. Yeah, probably were. But I remember the sweet shops and the big jars, and some of them are making a comeback now, aren't they? Where you get traditional sweet shops, but it has to be the glass jars. You have to get a ladder to go right up to the top. But do you remember sometimes they used to have the glass counters at the front of the shops as well,
packed with sweets,
and inside that there was always chocolate tools.
Yeah.
Do you remember? You could have a little chocolate spanner.
That's my I love chocolate so much. I'm a little bit of a tool. But yeah, I know.
Little chocolate screwdrivers, whatever. You
used to get them in Debenhams, didn't you, as a Christmas gift, a little set as well.
Yeah.
They'd bring them back out. Yeah. I mean, that now you go into a traditional sweet shop and they've got half of it's American sweets, like Nerds and stuff. And you just think, it's enough. There is enough historical English confectionery for us to fill a traditional sweet shop.
Travel sweets for just to start off. Travel sweets for the car. Yeah,
Princess Dial. yeah. So but fruit salads and Mojos, even late 80s, and blackjacks, they were the tough 2 for a penny sweets that you could get in a little paper bag wrapped over. And if you're lucky enough in your town, you'll have one of these traditional sweet shops coming back, but plastic jars now because they don't want to hurt anybody.
Well, if it falls over and
it could be a disaster.
It could be an absolute disaster. On the subject of disasters, we're going to be doing some more of those in a couple of moments.
Yeah.
Just want to give you a little reminder of the mystery sound as well, though, so we can see if you can work out what this was. I know you've been playing it in the interim
all the time
to your missus for over and over and over again. Have you had any more luck with it?
With the wife?
With either.
Loads of luck with guessing this, but no luck with the wife.
Has she left you yet? Here is the sound.
Advance in single file. What's the password?
Okay. It's tricky.
Do you need a clue?
No, I think we'll leave it. Some legends will get that. It's one of a couple of options, I think. And I think... Yeah, I think I know what it is, but it's a tricky one. It's the toughest one we've done, I think.
Yeah, but maybe it's the tough ones that are the good ones. If it doesn't go, we'll hold it over. If you
please give in. Oh, I like the jigs.
Oh dear,
which doesn't mean the program, but yes. So yeah, now right, the disasters on a national and international scale were one thing.
Yes,
okay? But the importance of a newspaper back in the day cannot be undermined, right? Because this is the news in 1985.
I love that you've got all
but
of
yeah,
these.
of course I have. Now this big headline, okay, big paper, May the 2nd, 1985. Inches from death, disaster. I think we'll all agree.
Yeah,
a pony. Haven't.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Stuck in the mud?
It came within inches of death after vandals hacked off its tail. Not nice, but that's the big headline. Big headline for the May 2nd, 1985. So, yes, it's we've got some real big stories here. There's a new cinema. They're flocking to a new cinema in Portsmouth. And it's going to be a quality place called Rendezvous
Cinema.
Rendezvous Cinema in Kingston Road, brand new in 1985, and we all know what a success that was, because here we are less than 40 years later. I've never bloody heard of it.
I've never heard of it either,
Rendezvous Cinema. Some people will be like, yeah, I went there.
Would that go at the same sort of time as like the Tricorn Centre, which was a great experiment as well?
Well, not in the 80s.
Yeah.
That was, I think Tricorn was a bit earlier than that.
Was
but
it?
It's a ritzy Hollywood afternoon club at the Rendezvous Cinema. I think that might have been a disaster. But yeah, so here we go. Oh, here we go. Did you need to know that there's a Line and Windows are doing cash in hand? There's actually an advert here, so that's brilliant. But yeah, so lots of disasters in the local news. Let's see what we've got on the headline of this one. Here we go. Hammered Hampshire Tories today were counting the cost of an election nightmare in which they lost control of the county council. What a disaster!
What an absolute utter disaster!
What a weird situation we're in where that's just happened again. So yeah, Portsmouth man leaves Russia.
He's
left Russia. That's big news on the front page here.
Well, there was a big disasters going on in Russia.
Yeah,
at the time as well.
Of
One of the
course.
things that we touched on last time around.
Yeah,
which I don't know if you remember when we were watching the news, James, and this came on the TV.
Russia has many nuclear stations like the one at Chernobyl, and they produce 15% of her electricity. The design is unique to Russia and not used in the West. News of the disaster was sparse, but on Wednesday the Russians released this picture said to be of the Chernobyl station after the fire.
Yeah.
See, we talked about that our last time around, and that was one of the big stories. Did it make it into the front page of the Haven't News?
Let's have a little look. Just having a little think. Well, Hampshire RAF officer Nigel Wood is to be Britain's first astronaut. Does that make it? That's the front page.
That's international, isn't it?
But there is an advert. I mean, obviously, it's not as big as Chernobyl, but it's close. Is an advert for the miracle of microwaves.
Oh my God!
Still radiation.
Yes,
still radiation. How much are you going to guess that Sharp's microwave 7100 is in pounds at Alders?
I'm going to guess that it's going to be a substantial amount of money even back then. I'm going to say,
because it's about 4 or 5 times that now.
Yeah,
when you work it out.
I was going to say when it was coming out, then would it have been £199?
£299.
Wow!
So you're looking at over £1,200 for a miracle microwave. It has to be a bloody miracle. It has to be a back rub for that.
So now, what would that be worth in today's money?
£1,200 now. Yeah, so it's £299. But it is stainless steel, oven capacity, easy touch control with digital display, and it's available for building in or freestanding. And it is normally $329. But yes, so I mean, that's close, isn't it? Because we were all scared of that sort of disaster.
Did they were the ones when the early ones came out? They didn't even have the thing to go round.
Oh no!
You had to put it on for a bit,
turn it around every now and again,
or turn it around a bit as well. It wasn't self-turning.
No, and we were all petrified of the radiation.
Yeah,
we thought that they were nuclear reactors in our kitchen, and it probably not helped by that disaster happening.
It's all radiation. All radiation is the same. But I do remember that when like my mum wouldn't have a microwave.
No,
she's petrified.
Oh yeah,
petrified.
Yeah, my granny went to visit my uncle, and he bought one because he had a bit of money, and she didn't want to go in the kitchen. Because they hadn't got sandbags around it. So it's it was a scary time, and things like we've said so much in these episodes, that it just snowballed. The rumours and the fear that we all heard about. It wasn't just someone picked up a bit of information about a story over here, something over here. It was the one story that you heard. Everybody were talking about it. Everybody heard about it, and rumours were rife.
Yes, rumours and jokes, of course, as well.
Yes,
as we said, as soon as you heard it in the morning, so by the time you got to school, somebody's made a joke of it, and your dad then tells you that joke,
and you go, "I know."
I know.
I don't remember any jokes about Chernobyl.
I was
sure there were.
The same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we were also genuinely scared.
Yeah.
Because if it's something that's going on, maybe it was because it was, if it happens in another country, it's not going to affect us.
Yeah.
But when they said that the radiation was going to come and poison our cows and make our milk go bad and the grass is going to go bad, maybe we were actually too scared as children to actually make jokes about Chernobyl, because I don't remember a single Chernobyl joke.
No, and I think, thinking about it, back in the 80s, we were so worried about the Reagan nuclear war with Russia. Who was the guy in Gorbachev?
Yeah.
And it was all like, we were When the Wind Blows. Do you remember that cartoon film thing?
Yes.
Was it Raymond Briggs, was it? Or something like that?
Yeah,
with two old people huddling in the
house.
Oh. And that was a cartoon you watch as a kid going, huh? Got to hide under a door frame or under the dining table if it goes off. I mean, that's not going to help. But then when he had this disaster as well, it was like, oh my God, we're all going to hell. So yeah, I think that maybe even kids who'd watched that cartoon and then saw the disaster were like, yeah, I'm just scared.
It was I think we were maybe we had a lower threshold for being scared, because you said, with social media and everything now, we're just constantly bombarded by strife and stress, whether it's Israel and Palestine, whether it's something else going on.
Watching this,
we've got watching this is about as stressful as it gets. But because we're just bombarded all the time, I think then when it was just coming in, a surprise burst, then that was it. I think the other thing that made Chernobyl worse as well was the fact that it had happened like a week ago, but nobody had realised because the Russians had kept it quiet.
And you know what I've suddenly realised is, back then, they would interrupt every fucking programme for a news flash. Like, there's a news flash. What's happened? There's a horse. It's had its tail cut off in Haven't. Anything. But the news flashes were... When's the last time we had a news flash? They don't bother.
I think at the moment, because we got the rolling news channels now, and they always just put everything's in the same thing. Everything's now breaking news, isn't it? There's always breaking news, breaking news, and it could be some just utter nonsense.
But I think it was that epitomised the 80s, though, is that there were big events that were happening that were disastrous, whether it's a Falklands War or whether it was an IRA bombing or something had happened, and it was bang. These days, not bang, that's not
James, that's going to get you cancelled for being very poor taste.
Just a flash, sudden. Christ. I mean, some people say it's a disaster when the IRA bombed the hotel in Brighton and they didn't kill Maggie Thatcher. That was a big thing where they go, that was disastrous. Not the bombing itself, but the fact that they missed her. Lots of people would have been dancing around if that happened. But they would interrupt TV shows all the time with these news flashes of huge events like this sort of thing, Chernobyl and stuff, and that doesn't happen. And I guess that's because they know they don't want to interrupt Emmerdale Farm, because if it's that big, we would have been notified by Twitter.
We get the thing on the phone as well. But I think in those days as well, there were people at the TV channels all the time. Every time a new program came on, a man in a brown overcoat would have to press a button to make that come on. Now it's all done. It's all computed magic, isn't it? So there's nobody there,
isn't there?
Oh. Nobody there, James.
Oh, what? Susanna Reid's not there.
She's just it's AI now.
It's just in my mind.
She's not there. Just gotta get that pause. Just gotta get that pause just right there, James.
Oh God, but she's jigging. There we are. Well done, Susanna. Oh dear God.
So anyway, if you've happened across this podcast just by accident,
sorry.
Our apologies.
What a disaster.
What a disaster. Sometimes the disasters were disasters, but not in such like a life-threatening manner. Sometimes there would be a disaster that would happen like this from 1989.
Meet and greet your hosts, Mick Fleetwood and Samantha Fox.
She's out of control already, I can tell. I've got to control this woman. I've got to control her over here.
Oh, that's a good start, wasn't it, Mick?
The legendary, the sensational, the Four Tops.
Hello.
That's not him, is it?
Like him, George.
No, I'm the one top. The Four Tops have been held up. They're putting their makeup on.
Oh my God, that was the worst ever Brits. It was Mick Fleetwood and Samantha Fox.
Yeah.
And obviously one's 18 feet tall, the other one's just 3'2".
Yeah.
And they walked on stage with the wrong microphones, one up there, one down there.
Yeah.
And then there was just non-stop disasters.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the rapport going on.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd think that they would have those two. Such characters. I mean, live TV was a lot more commonplace in the 80s. And disaster was at every turn. Whether it was a telethon, whether it was, Live Aid or some random thing, let's do it live. What could go wrong? Often involving animals. I mean, there'd be something. And those sorts of shows and award ceremonies were often live. They've learned.
Yes, I think even so, even to the 90s, they didn't learn though with the Brits. And I think you almost watch it just to see what is going to happen, who's going to ambush Michael Jackson,
of course,
or whatever.
Or Oasis are going to rock up in the 90s and say something controversial.
Or John Prescott will be sitting there for no apparent reason, so somebody will chuck a pint of beer over his head.
Why not?
So why not?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for doing live stuff, I think, really, just for that little bit of frisson.
Yeah, we should do a live version of this.
We should do a live version of this.
Not edited down to make us look sexier.
The bit. So, I mean, a lot of people who were not around in the 80s would be grossly offended by some of the way we've dealt with some of the subjects in this episode and the previous episode.
Well, I think less than you imagine are watching. Yeah, no, I think that the thing to remember is that obviously when you look at things from the angle and the age that we were in the 80s, you looked at things in a different way. You dealt with things differently, and it's not in a way where to belittle any of the disasters that have happened, but just in a way that you made light of it when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And people listening to this were children or teens or very young adults, and it just seemed to be so commonplace things happening, as we touched on. So many different disasters, left, right, and centre.
There were definitely more and more disasters.
I mean, obviously there are lots of things happening that are bad in the world all the time, but it just feels like, whether it was, as I say, a bombing or the Falklands War or Zeebrugge Ferry or AIDS or any of the things that we've spoken about,
bombarded,
seemed to be
disasters
every 6 months. Let's say, there was something pretty significant.
But these were the disasters that were definitely going to affect us for some reason. We would not get on a plane
or a ferry.
We would not get on a ferry.
No.
We would be worried about going outside at night in case Halley's Comet came and smashed into us.
I think there was certainly a little bit of stirring going on in the press. Certainly a little bit. And it wasn't as, now you look at it on Twitter or Facebook, you go, really? Okay, let's see if that's actually true. And there'll be a correction, little comment underneath going, this is bullshit. But they couldn't do that on the BBC. They were like, yes, and we're going to all have acid rain in our apples. And there's no comment that came up underneath going, this is actually bollocks. If they did that, we would have been like, phew, I'm going to go and eat me apple pie from McDonald's in safety. So we just fell for everything we were told. So even if the disaster was actually not that big a deal to impact our personal lives and satellites weren't going to fall out of the sky, we'd just fall for it and panic on a personal level at every incident, as you say. So Lockerbie, Scotland, awful disaster, of course, but we're looking up every time there's a biplane going over it over Portsmouth.
At what point did the thing come up after the TV? When did they start doing the thing? If you've been affected by the issues raised in this programme, there's a helpline for you. Did that start in the 80s, or was that? It
must have been 80s after EastEnders and stuff like that, because EastEnders started really dealing with some heavy topics, and certainly in the late 80s, when they started realising they have to do something a bit more disastrous to get the viewers, and they'd say at the end, if you've been affected by anything, and we'll be doing that at the end of this episode. We're going to introduce it at the end of every episode, not just this one, even when we're talking about cars, sweets. If you've been affected by anything, then this episode, this podcast is not for you.
Definitely not. This is definitely not, because I think it's difficult to explain how people's sense of humour has changed over the years, and I think it's really difficult to explain how easily offended people are by bloody anything now. And I always want to say, when somebody says I'm offended, I just want to say, well, I'm offended that you're offended. And you just goes round, because I literally am offended by somebody else's offence.
You're one of them.
I am.
You are easily offended
one of them now. Yeah.
You know what? I actually don't think people are more offended than they used to be. As a comic and on stage and doing stuff, what I actually think is, like we've touched on earlier, is they have a platform to tell you they're offended.
Yeah.
Before, they go home and they tell the babysitter or their mum, oh, that really was offensive. And that's fine. And it is fine to be offended, because it's a personal thing, offence. But now, if they're offended, they go on to and have their 733 followers on Twitter, and they tell them, and then they tag in, whoever they're tagging in, and it goes viral and gets onto the news. Maybe, I don't know. And then at the bottom of the news, it says, "No, this is bullshit. It's not offensive." It's not, and. People still joke about, you still got to make light of some serious issues. It helps you get through the day.
You have to.
It doesn't have to be rude or disingenuous or nasty about a particular person or even a disaster. But you can find a humorous way to just lighten the mood a little bit. And that's what we used to do a lot.
I think the trick is, there was always, when the first words come out, you always say, too soon? It's like, if it's happened 5 minutes, too soon?
Or now, 30 years. Too soon? Really? Yeah, and I think that sums up our last few episodes, is you can look back now and go, there was a hell of a lot of things that were going wrong in the 80s, and I know there are a lot of things going wrong now. But wow, we seem to have our real focus. Our attention was drawn, wasn't it, through the 4 channels and the 3 newspapers, and obviously the local news with people trying to sell micros for 300 quid.
And the horses, the ponies getting their tails cut off. Yeah.
I mean, that's headline news.
Headline news.
But it was his tail, weirdly. So, yeah.
I think also as well, when it comes to complaining, obviously you can get, you could stir up your few hundred Twitter followers and, do that way. But it's also much more easy to make an official complaint now as well. Because I found that over the years when I've been on the radio, back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you couldn't send an email to complain.
No.
If I said something that somebody really didn't like, first of all, they would phone up. Usually 9 times out of 10 it would come straight through to me, so I would put them on hold and then put another voice on and deal with it as another person.
Naughty boy.
I did do a couple of times, but the other time, the only other thing you could do if you didn't phone would be to send a letter, and by the time
points of view
or to whoever, but by the time you've done that, you can't be really pissed off with something to actually physically sit down and write
handwrite or type
it or type it and then take it to the post box and post it. By then the anger's worn off. I think now people get instantly angry
and go pick up their phone.
Pick up the phone
as they're watching something.
Straight on.
People will be doing it now. But do you remember Points of View? That was the big one.
Robinson,
or Terry Wogan.
Of course, yes.
And dear Points of View, I was appalled at the way you broadcast Crufts the last weekend, and didn't focus on the Afghan hounds as requested. It's like, what? People getting so angry. I'm talking about people getting offended. People were so so angry about the littlest things that happened on Points of View, which is why Terry Wogan's a perfect host, of course, because he was very sarcastic about it.
Give a toss, did he?
I must say, looking back and comparing the 80s to now, and the way that disasters are, and the way that the press deal with them, and the way that we dealt with them as children, one of the biggest disasters in 1989, that is the reason for all of this problem, is that the proposal was submitted for the World Wide Web in May 1989. That was the disaster.
The beginning of the end.
That was when they finally revealed to us that we're all plugged in, and we're just going to start slowly letting you understand there's nothing to do with you. We're all in control.
I love the way that when they started putting the bits and bobs on about the internet as well, it was all about the fact that you'd be able to buy stuff. It was all about the fact that you'd be able to do your work from home.
Information.
It wasn't even dreamed that you'd just be sitting there like
Scroll.
TikTok for hours. Guilty.
But it would have been a bit different if on Blue Peter they said, well, the World Wide Web, it's May 1989, you're going to be able to upload information, contact customers, you'll be able to sell products, and you'll be able to call Billy from Waterlooville a twat. It wouldn't have been that you don't know. That wouldn't have been a selling point, I don't think. So they it's just become, it's a wonderful device. It is wonderful, and it does help our lives.
Well, it helps. We're using it right this very second, James, aren't we?
Hi.
Right this second.
Hello, everybody. but it has, like most things, it has a negative.
Yes, definitely. And one day,
some people would say this was one of the negative parts of the internet.
Well, here's a disaster waiting to happen. Yeah. One day the internet will break.
Oh,
and then where will we all be?
I'll probably back in Portsmouth News,
in the news,
just reading through the newspaper, driving my Toyota Carina.
Luckily, you've got a big stash of newspapers from the 80s, books from the 80s. Yeah. You've still got your VHS videos from the 80s that you can watch over and over again. So we'll all be piling round to yours, James.
Yeah, and we can watch
when the
Die
internet
Hard
breaks.
when the Nakatomi Plaza blew up. One of the biggest disasters of the 80s.
And on that note, thank you for watching. If you know what the mystery sound is, let us know in the comments.
Please do.
The prize. I don't think we mentioned the prize for the mystery sound. Bring back the 80s t-shirts.
We just posted some off today, actually. There's some lucky buggers. They might not class themselves as lucky. Or you can have a couple of tickets to any of my comedy nights. They're on every Friday and Saturday somewhere in the south of England. So if you don't fancy a t-shirt, then you can just say, James, I'm free next Friday. What do you fancy? And I'll say, let's go for a Bernie Inn. The wife's away. And you go, no, what a disaster.
Speaking of your comedy nights, James, is there a handy website where people can see what's on and where?
I think probably the most obvious place to go is stitches.fun. That's a website.
.fun, that's good.
It's a brilliant website, isn't it? And that's got most of the venues. There are other clubs I run and other places I'll be, but that's the most prolific.
So if you want to do that, and of course you could choose, if you know what the mystery sound is, choose the one. You can start already looking to see which one you might find. Like sometimes if you go out for a meal, I like to go online and have a look at the menu first, so I know.
And then you can order straight away, and the other 8 people are still choosing, and you're there hungry, going, for God's sake, just pick something. It's not that difficult. And you just want a prawn ring, don't you? And steak and chips and peas.
And what to finish, the old black velvet pudding.
Is it?
Yeah.
Not a Knickerbocker Glory with the sparklers?
Knickerbocker Glory would do as a second choice.
And then you might get a nice boiled sweet lolly at the end.
If you've been a good boy.
So what are you doing, Andy, over that week?
These days, I've still not got a proper job, but I have got a kind of proper job that I will tell more about in a future edition.
Okay.
But after having had my radio career of 25 years,
that's a long time,
just snatched away.
Bastards.
Got to cut out the middle band and stop doing this now. So every night, live at 8 o'clock, it's Andy Jackson's Evening Show.
Oh, lovely. Is that Andy Jackson's Evening Show.com. That's lovely. Yeah, I'll be tuning in. And is there a fax number I can send in?
Absolutely, send a fax or whatever. And if you need to, if you're expecting a reply as well, self-stamped addressed envelope,
please.
Always.
Every
time. There we go. Free phone something or other as well. So anyway, that's our bits and pieces in between. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another week's time for what we think is going to be episode 13. Unlucky 13.
Weirdly, not about disasters. No, unlucky for you. No, I don't know what it's about, but whatever it is about, won't be such a touchy subject.
We might have been cancelled by then,
No.
James. We might have been cancelled.
How could that?
Until then, we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition. We'd love it if you could subscribe in your favourite podcast app. And don't forget, there's a video version on YouTube too. You can contact us using the links in the show notes and on the YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time for another edition of Bring Back the 80s.